Hey you guys, Matt Allen here. Welcome back to Tactical Bassin'. Today we're talking topwater. As we get into the middle and the end of summer, bass start getting pretty savvy, but we've got some topwater tricks that will help you keep catching fish throughout the rest of summer. Summer is prime time for throwing topwater. Bass love to ambush. These fish set up, they find their sweet spot, and when bait fish come too close, they're on them. Whether that's shad, herring, bluegill, doesn't matter. Bass love to ambush their prey on the surface. And who doesn't love a good topwater bite? We all do. Topwater fishing is some of the most memorable bass fishing that you can do. Some of those strikes that you get will stay with you for years. It's incredible. You just replay them all winter long, dreaming about warmer days ahead. Topwater fishing is a riot. But this time of year, bass are getting pretty savvy. They didn't just pull into the shallows. They're not just seeing the first lure of the year. See, in springtime, a lot of these fish are just starting to get fished for again. A lot of guys bail in the fall and winter. There's less pressure. So those first topwater fish in the spring, I mean, those fish will massacre almost anything. We have favorites then too, but those fish are aggressive. By now, bass have seen it all. If you are the 400th super spook to come down the bank this summer, odds are that the bass are probably going to pass on it. That's nothing against a super spook. It's a great bait. But when fish see the same lures over and over, month after month, they just stop falling for them. So by now, this time of year, your presentation has got to be a little bit more dialed if you want to keep really catching those fish. We've got some tricks up our sleeves. We've got some things that we do different this time of year to keep fooling those fish. And today I'm going to talk to you about that. The first one is straight retrieve baits. When this water's warm, if it's too hot, the bass kind of get lethargic. They sort of suck into cover and they just wait it out. But low light, they'll still get aggressive, they'll still feed. Warm water temps, not too hot, warm water temps, these bass, they're killing machines. I mean, they are out there eating, and we're able to take advantage of that too. So the first thing that I like to do personally this time of year is set down my bread and butter walking baits. I set them down. Now we're still gonna talk about them. I've got a couple of niche things here that we'll talk about. But day in and day out, all over the country, the first thing I'm gonna do this time of year is set down my bread and butter baits. My walking baits, the ones I've got the most confidence in, I'm setting them aside and I'm focusing in on fast moving baits, straight retrieve baits, baits where the fish have to decide right now, kill it or let it go. See, these fish, like I said, have seen bait after bait after bait. So if you come through with that super spook, or some other walking bait, and you're coming through nice and slow, and the fish is watching it go by, they'll come out and they'll follow. Maybe you've seen bass do that. They get behind them and they hunt right there with it. It's amazing to watch. But those fish, they've seen it before. They're probably gonna bail off. Fast moving baits. I've got 4 of them here for you. First one is a buzzbait. These are in no particular order, okay? In the video description, we're gonna cover some baits here in a minute. In the video description, I'm gonna link all these baits for you. And I'm going to give you my favorite colors and my favorite sizes for each one of them. I'm even gonna give you a bunch of rods that you could pick and choose from if you need a good topwater rod. If you don't, great. But I'm gonna link them for you because I don't want you to have to try and keep up. I'm gonna cover a lot of baits very quickly. Not all of these are for you, and I want you to understand that going in. Right now we're talking straight retrieve. I'm gonna show you a few different versions of straight retrieve, and I want you to consider which one of them best suits where you fish. Okay, and I'll try and give you some description that will help with that. The first one is a buzzbait. Okay, the advantage of a buzzbait is you're covering, again, a ton of water very, very quickly, and the fish don't have time to study it. That bait is up there spinning on the surface. In this case, that tail's back there kicking. In this case, it's clacking, making a ruckus. And those fish either blast it or turn it loose. It's one or the other. This is a mega bass. This particular bait, see, it's got this brass bead on here. I think this is a cool bait. It's got these 4 long tails, so it doesn't even need a trailer. You can put a trailer hook on it if you want, but the bait itself, you can fish straight out of the package. The Jamaica boa is what that's called. Really neat bait, really loud, really obnoxious. Now, let's talk about the buzzbait specifically. The advantage of a buzzbait is we've got that straight retrieve covering a ton of water, and we're very, very weedless. If you've got a mix of grass and open water, the buzzbait is very effective. Maybe you're going down the shoreline and it's open, 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 and then all of a sudden you throw over a patch of hydrilla or a patch of leafy grass. The buzzbait will run right over that stuff. So if you've got a mix, a buzzbait is a great option. The downside of a buzzbait, one, is that it's a great big presentation, so they won't always eat it. But the buzzbait, I've got 2 versions here. So the Jamaica boa, loud, obnoxious. I like to throw it in the bright, bold colors. If I'm going for bold, I go all the way. I want bright and bold. At the other end of the spectrum, we've got this one. This is Dirty Jigs. This is a skirtless buzz, and then I add the swim bait. This is a River to Sea D-Walker, the 120 size. It's an incredibly durable swim bait. You can slide them up onto that bait or onto that frame, because inside there is just a lead, I'm not even gonna pull it out, but there's a lead frame in there. You slide it up on it. That particular swim bait will last through tons, I mean, countless fish. It just keeps going and going. It's very durable. But here we're more subtle. There's no clacker. It's a smaller blade. No skirt, just a swim bait. So the fish are hearing the commotion, but they're seeing a swim bait. More natural, more aggressive, but we're fishing this in a mix of open water and grass. Next up, we've got the Whopper Plopper. The Whopper Plopper, I mean, almost everybody knows what a Whopper Plopper is, and almost everyone's caught a fish on one. The Whopper Plopper is incredibly effective. The bait runs straight, the back end spins around, and it makes this whop, 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 whop sound as that blade goes around. Whopper Ploppers have a perfect speed. You want to throw them out, go a little faster, go a little slower until you hear that loudest whop, 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 whop. Once you hear the loudest sound, that's your speed. You go that speed. The Whopper Plopper is incredible in open water. If there's not a lot of grass, if the fish are busting in the open, if they're chasing over the top of grass but none of the grass is on the surface, the Whopper Plopper, I mean, is unmatched. It's incredible how well these work. The 110 is definitely my overall favorite size, but I still throw the 130 a lot as well. The advantage of the 130 is you've got bigger hooks. So if I'm in a place with a lot of big fish, I throw the 130. Also, it comes in some really cool colors. Like that's TW Bluegill. That's only offered in the 130. You have to throw that size to get the color, and it's an incredible color. But either the 110 or the 130, depending on how big the bait fish are in your lake. The downside of a Whopper Plopper is grass. One blade of grass will get into that joint and clog it up. One blade of grass, that's all it takes to stop that bait from being effective. So we've got one for truly open water, one for a mix of open and grass. That brings us to this crazy looking bait right here. This is the ZMan Hellraiser. Comes in 2 sizes. It came out last year, and then at ICAST this year they announced a smaller size. I have not actually fished the smaller size yet. I've done all my damage on the bigger one. But the Hellraiser is a really unique bait. It's a sinking bait, much like a buzzbait. If you throw it out and stop, it'll go to bottom. So think of it as a buzzbait. Throw it out and immediately start winding. The bait itself has this funny, flat face to it. What it does coming through the water is it hunts like this. And then behind that, you have this blade that is like a chatterbait inspired weighted blade, okay? So it sits blade down in the water and that blade goes back and forth and the head hunts back and forth. And it's got this really unique sound to it. Again, open water, just like a Whopper Plopper. When do I throw one over the other? Totally simple. Ready for this? If open water speaks to you, if the Whopper Plopper is your deal, but everyone around you throws a Whopper Plopper, try a Hellraiser. If they don't, throw a Whopper Plopper. I mean, it's proven, it's a great bait, it crushes them. But the Hellraiser just recently came out, it's a year old, way less people are throwing it. It's a different sound, it's more subtle than a Whopper Plopper, and those fish just are not hearing that, and it gets them. I love that it sits tail down. My hookup ratio is really, really high. If they take a shot at it, they typically get it. Last but not least in the category, and this is the main category I want to talk about, is these straight retrieve baits. Last but not least is this guy, the Teckle Blade Waker, a very strange looking bait. I mean, it looks like a chatterbait with a bizarre blade on the front of it, right? It's essentially what it is. It's essentially a topwater chatterbait. It's going to fish somewhere between a chatterbait and a buzzbait, okay? This blade gets up there and does this walk, and it spits water both directions as it's going. Much more subtle than the average buzz. It's got a little weed guard on it, single jig hook. I like to dress it up with a small swim bait. That's a net bait Spanky. That's been my best swim bait on the back of this. If you put a really good, strong thumping swim bait on it, I honestly feel like it takes away from the action. So I like to put a subtle, natural little swim bait on there that just sort of completes the profile, but doesn't take away from what the blade is doing. The blade is spitting, you're going fast, straight retrieve, and the fish are just going to lash out at it. Again, much like the Hellraiser is to the Whopper Plopper, this is to a buzzbait. If you are on a pressured fishery, a place where a lot of people are throwing topwater, maybe they're throwing a lot of buzzbaits, try this Blade Waker. I've said this before, when we moved from California to Chickamauga, the first couple months that we were on the water, like our first day out, Tim and I went out on the water just to start exploring, and I started catching them on this Blade Waker. For like the first, I don't know, 6 weeks that we lived here, it was literally the only thing I caught fish on. I caught fish on it every single day, everywhere we went. Right now, this time of year, I blasted fish on it everywhere. It was crazy how well it worked. It was very obvious to me that the fish had not seen it. They were used to the style of bait, but not that particular bait, not that profile, not that sound. And I had fish, I mean, they'd come right up to the boat chasing it and just crush it. They wouldn't stop coming. And that speaks volumes about the effectiveness of the bait. So again, my main deal this time of year, because I want to be different and I don't want to give the fish time to analyze the bait, for lack of a better term. I want them to see it and either go or let it go. One or the other. Just boom, split decision, ambush. That works really well this time of year. Now, with that said, there are some niches where you need other things, right? One of those being places that are chock full of weeds. Obviously, you still need a frog. Frogs are incredibly effective. In that situation, a couple of thoughts for you. Again, fish have been seeing baits all summer. You are not the first frog to come through those pads or over that grass. One thing that I like to do is throw a toad style. This is that spro, this stretches. It's really cool. I used to throw actual toad style baits. Now I throw this Spro more than anything because it's really durable. It's got a great hookup ratio, and I'm not going through a pack of baits every evening. I can just keep throwing that one. This straight retrieve over the top of all the junk, and it gets them just like the other straight retrieve baits. But in some situations, they seem to still want that slower presentation, especially if the matted vegetation is really thick. It takes some time to locate the bait and blast through for it. Some situations you've got to throw a big traditional frog, but if you're anything else, I will advocate for throwing on the smaller end of frogs. And we'll get to small baits. We're going to end with small baits. But even on the smaller end of traditional baits, here's a couple of frogs to think about. One is the Spro Bronze Eye. The other is the Snag Proof Bobby's Perfect. As full-size frogs go, they're pretty small and they're pretty lightweight, which means as they're coming across a mat, they're not pushing as hard as other frogs. It's less profile. If there's a bunch of chop on the water, that's a bad thing. It's harder for the fish to find it. But on a hot, calm day, it's just more subtle. Notice the colors I went with too. Very natural, very neutral. Normally, I'm an advocate of a bright chartreuse frog. But by the time we get to this end of the year, you start, I still am. My buzzbait, right? Bright chartreuse. Bone in the Whopper Plopper. But when we're talking about being really finessey with the frog and trying to pick off fish that have seen a lot, those really natural colors, slightly smaller, go a long way. Another niche. There is a time and a place for a walking bait. Even when I say set your walking bait down, some lakes it's the deal, especially if they're chasing bait. If you've got shad that are up and bass are busting them, even though they've seen 1,000 walking baits, a walking bait still works. Couple of thoughts on that. The biggest thing is don't throw your everyday bait. Whether that's a spook or something else, just stop throwing your everyday bait. Try something different. Like, you guys know how much we like the shower blows. Tim lives and dies with this bait, right? Couple of other thoughts for you. Here's two. Megabass Giant Dog X. You guys have seen the damage I've done with this all summer long. It's just more subtle, more natural. If I get a big chop on the water, it's a bad thing, right? You need that sound to pull those fish. And it's got sound, but it's not bold and obnoxious like some of the other baits. When it starts getting calm, early in the day, late in the day, or slick calm midday, that bait is just so effective. Here's another one. Evergreen Shower Blows. This is the JT. There's a 115, there's also a smaller one. I personally like the big one because I can throw it farther. The Shower Blows, incredibly effective bait. Here's the JT, still by Evergreen. You got it? Dead silent. Completely overlooked. Like, I don't know anyone that throws this bait. I pound them on this bait. And it's cool because it's dead silent. So sometimes I'll throw really natural colors, but sometimes I still get to throw those bright, bold, obnoxious colors, like a bone Shower Blows making a huge commotion, or a bone vixen. It's just too much this time of year. But this bait in bone, dead silent, they'll still crush it. So think about that. You've seen the damage we've done here. Amazing bait. I've been silently cracking them on this one too. Another amazing alternative. All right, last thing, and then we're going to talk through some rods really quickly. Last thing I want you to consider is really downsizing. And that's in every single category. Okay, it's so hot out here that the camera just completely overheated. So I might have to speed it up to be able to get through the last of this. But when it comes to small baits, it's every single category. In the straight retrieve, it's that little Jackal Darabuzz. Super, super subtle. You want to be different? Go smaller. Go really, really small. You'll be surprised how many fish are still willing to commit to that this time of year. For the frog, no surprise there, the Jackal Kiara, glitter Hasu, such a deadly color. That or glitter bluegill are unbelievable how effective those are. And then for walking baits, I've got two of them. This is the Owner Zip and Ziggy. Then that's little Megabass Dog X Jr. Both incredible little baits. Now you're so small here that you are much more effective throwing this on bait finesse than on traditional gear. But that's the only one that you would need to throw that way. Now, as far as rods go, I mean, I think most people know my favorite combo, right? This is a G Loomis GLX 843C MBR. Mouthful. It's in the MBR series, Mag Bass Rod. 843C MBR is the best topwater rod I've ever experienced. I absolutely love this rod. I've paired it to lots of reels over the years. Lately, I've been fishing it paired to a Corrado 70 MGL because it's incredibly comfortable in the hand. And with that MGL spool, my casting distance is just out of this world. Even with lightweight walking baits, I can cover tons and tons of water. This is a really unique rod because it's stout in the mid. It's a medium heavy, but the tip section is so light that it just pins those little tiny treble hooks. Now, generally speaking, depending on the size of bait, you just want to throw something in the medium to medium heavy. You know, 7 foot to 7'3", even shorter, like a 6'10" to a 7'3", medium or medium heavy, you're going to be good. You guys probably own a rod that can throw the vast majority of these baits already. One thing I will advocate for is a reel that will send it. This is the Concept C2. That's the white one, 13 Fishing Concept C2. This is a Corrado 150 MGL. Again, bigger than the other one, but the MGL spool. Whether that's a Corrado 70, a Corrado 150, a Metanium MGL, whatever it is, those MGL spools will just send it. So go with a reel that will get you that distance so you can cover a ton of water. And then my final thought for you. The best frog rod I have ever owned, hands down, is the Shimano X-Pride 7.3 Extra Heavy. Tim and I both love that frog rod. I have a handful of them because I frog a lot and I want multiple frogs on deck. So I have 3 of these that I keep spooled up, ready to rock to frog fish. But I'm talking a lot about throwing mid-sized frogs down to tiny frogs. This will save you some money if you're looking for a frog rod because this drops down to Shimano's Zodius line. This is the 7.1 Heavy. Big full-size frogs, 7.3 Extra Heavy all day long. Oversized frogs, 7.3 Extra Heavy. But those small to medium frogs, I've been fishing on that 7.1 Heavy, and it's incredibly effective. It's just a little softer tip section that lets me be more accurate laying those smaller frogs out there, but I've still got a ton of horsepower to crack those fish. And then this is actually the Metanium MGL. That's my favorite frog reel. But again, it's about distance. It's that MGL spool all the way through the line, whether it's Metanium, Corrado, all the way down to SLX. Those MGL spools just rock. I get so much distance that those are generally what I use for my topwater fishing across the board. So, recapping the whole thing, topwater is so effective right now, but if you're throwing the same bait you've been throwing or the same bait everyone else has been throwing, you're in trouble. It's time to adapt. It's time to throw some different profiles, different retrieves, getting away from what everybody else is doing to keep catching these fish. And these are baits that will help you do it. Again, you do not need all of them. Hopefully you listened for the ones that fit your scenario the best, and you can just grab 1 or 2 of those if you don't already own them. Hopefully you already own them and you just go, oh shoot, I didn't think about that. You grab your other bait and you go. But again, in the video description, I'll link all the baits, the gear, all of it to help you guys out so that you know exactly what Tim and I are throwing. the exact colors. I'll give you color recommendations to our favorite colors. Everything we can do to help you go out there with confidence and catch more fish throughout the rest of summer. If you enjoyed the video, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and we'll talk to you soon.